One perennial problem that the federal government is having a hard time finding a solution for is insecurity. Every year in Nigeria, bandits stage attacks on communities claiming lives and property, which has crippled economic activities in a lot of areas in various states. Just 2 weeks ago, during the Christmas festivities, more than 100 people were killed in attacks in Nigeria's northern Plateau state. Solving the problem of insecurity in Nigeria for years now has been a hard nut to crack for the federal government. Will we ever get to the point in our nation where people can experience freedom to operate and move around without having the fear at the back of their minds that something might go wrong? Joining us on the morning show today to discuss the never-ending conversation on solutions to insecurity and how the federal government can approach this issue in 2024 is Colonel Hassan Stan-Labo, a veteran and retired officer with a wealth of combat operational experience spanning his duty tour of Liberia, Sierra Leone, the West Darfur and Bakassi Peninsula as part of the Army's Elite Infantry Special Forces Corps. He's now a security consultant, defense strategist. Welcome to the morning show, Colonel Hassan Stan-Labo.
Thank you very much, Ayo. Thank you, Dr. Abati, and my good friend.
Happy New Year to you, sir. Good to see you, sir. Been a while. Happy New Year, sir.
Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Colonel, this morning we've been discussing the state of insecurity in Nigeria, the same way we've been doing since this year started. And we were referring to the latest reactions by General David Mark, or Senator David Mark, as is otherwise now known, saying that the security architecture needs to be rejigged and that a state of emergency should be declared on the plateau. And then, of course, you also have the Southern and Middle Belt Leaders Forum, SMBLF, saying that President Buhari, in fact, did nothing to address insecurity. That if anything, he was promoting terrorists along with some other governors. And that all that talk about the Buhari administration downgraded, decimated, that it had no effect. And they were advising President Tinubu not to follow the example of Buhari, to be decisive in dealing with insecurity. The NBA president also spoke along the same lines, saying that security should be a major priority. The same also statement was made by Mr. Peter Obi of the Labour Party, who said securing Nigeria should be a major priority. Now, what is there to rejig in the security architecture? And do you agree that President Buhari, rather than addressing security, in fact promoted insecurity by looking the other way for the better part?
Thank you so much. Well, okay. There's a cut in communication.
I can hear you.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me, Dr. Dabati?
Yes, clearly.
All right, good.
Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. I would say I agree with the opinion that General Buhari in the last 8 years or thereabout did virtually nothing, and I mean virtually nothing, in our fight against terrorism. If anything, he promoted and enhanced our hardship as far as the fight against terrorism was concerned. It's unfortunate that we are talking about our number one citizen as at then, within the period of the last 8 years, a period which I refer to that Nigeria had no political leader. We saw all the lines of actions taken by the, political strategic level of decision making. We saw all the lines of action taken even from the presidency. We saw how ministers who had business or things to do with terrorists were made to remain in their positions as ministers. One was even in charge of our entire national data. We could go on and on and on. We allowed undue sentiments right from the presidency to be visited in our alleged purported plan or action against terrorism. You could read religion, you could read tribalism, you could read ethnicity, and so on. It's unfortunate. And at the subnational level, we had governors, especially up north where I come from, under that administration, that had all sorts of romance and unholy relationship with terrorism, degenerating to a situation where some of them were even talking of amnesty. It was shocking to some of us. Amnesty for who? You tell me they are repentant terrorists. Repentant from what? We are soldiers. Our duty is not to come here and grant repentance. Our duty is to hasten your appointment with God to heaven or hell, where he will grant you penance. So, for us to be bringing large number of men from the forest who hitherto were armed and taking on fellow Nigerians, then on the appearance of soldiers, they drop their weapon and you are compelled as a professional to take them PWs and you bring them back to us and say they are repentant what? And then you give their godfathers sitting in government houses to begin to talk about amnesty and even referring us to how amnesty was granted to some chaps way back in the under what's his name? Yeah, President Yaradua in the creeks. It's unfortunate. So now we have a new administration in place. In the last 6 or 7 months, I have not seen a change, so to speak, from what has been happening in the last 8 years. We will hope that the president now is not listening to some ill advice coming in from some elements or people who have sympathy with the last administration to him as to how to fight terrorism. We have an ample opportunity now to change the guard in how we fight terrorism. We should not. I appeal to my colleagues in the military. I understand very much what the rules of international law of war says concerning PWs and so on. I must tell you, gentlemen, if we've got to fight this war and come out of it unscathed and make sure that we don't eventually leave this war for our grandchildren to fight continually because of our attitude, then we've got to face this war and face it with all the brute it calls for. Face it with all the seriousness it calls for. Absolutely. And not to start heaping PWs here and there. The more PWs we gather, the more we are heaping up a reserve force for belligerents who tomorrow will face our children. Well, whether we want to accept it or not, that is the bitter truth.
Thank you for
simple.
The bitter truth as you described.
When you meet them in the forest, bring them down.
All right.
Your duty is to hasten his appointment with God.
All right, okay.
Let him go to heaven or hell and ask for his penance.
All right. Now, Colonel Stan-Labo, thank you so much. I mean, you've come in this morning talking tough, especially in the area of insecurity, and this is what some Nigerians are expecting from their leaders, from our leaders, in terms of a tough stance, taking no prisoners when it comes to the issue of insecurity, like you said, to prevent our children and generations afterwards from fighting. Colonel Stan-Labo, can you hear me, please? We'll go on a short break. When we come back, we'll make that connection again with Colonel Hassan Stan-Labo. Stay tuned. You're welcome back. It's still the morning show here on Arise News. Before the break, we're speaking with Colonel Hassan, Stan-Labo, a veteran and retired officer with a wealth of combat operational experience, speaking about the insecurity situation in Nigeria. Just before the break, he had talked about, or he has spilled the bitter truth in his words, talking about how this administration or leadership must take a decisive action when it comes to insecurity and not with kids' gloves. Let me take you on, Colonel Hassan Stan-Labo. Great to have you back on the show. Hope you can hear me now.
Yes, please, I can hear you.
Excellent. All right. So talking about insecurity, earlier this morning, we are taking a story with regards to the former Senate President, Senator David Mark, who is also from the Middle Belt area of Nigeria, where he said that perhaps it was time for the president to review the security strategy, as obviously what's currently on ground isn't working. I'd like to get your take on that statement and what you think would, or what would look like a security strategy or architectural review, and especially to tackle the issue in the Middle Belt. You said something really important, that we need to, the reason why we must act and act now is so that our children or generations afterwards do not continue to fight this war. Because if you recall, the farmer-herder clash has dated pre-independence, and we're still dealing with that in Middle Belt areas. We're still having killings. In 2023, over 300 people killed in a particular local government area. So what are some of the things that would look like a security review in terms of this administration? Or perhaps do you think what's on ground is currently working?
Thank you so much, Ayo. I'm afraid I think what we have on ground doesn't seem to be working. And what do we have on ground? I think it's all about the over-centralization of the security architecture. Looking at our police, for instance, which is supposed to be the lead agency when we talk about security agencies now. Because even the role the military is playing all over the country now is actually the role of the police. If we decentralize to a point where we have state police, introduced into our system, okay, and community policing itself, gaining ground adequately. I think to a greater extent, so much pressure will be taken off, and there will be some level of seamlessness, in the way we forge ahead. These are things that we should have done all along. These are things we should have done in the first year of the last administration. Frankly speaking, I thought by the first year of the administration, we could have, done with this and then begin to perfect the entire whole thing. And by the exit period of the 8th year of the last president, we must have attained some level of perfection when it comes to state policing or community policing. But unfortunately, we have left these things undone. And I want to urge the present number one citizen, the commander-in-chief, to look at this seriously. Because like the situation is now, we have to start taking some very drastic actions. We have to start taking some very drastic actions. Serious nations all over the world are taking drastic actions in resolving their problems and their issues, especially when it borders on security. See what Israel is doing. Even when the whole world is condemning them, they don't give it down, because their national interest comes first. Here, I don't even know whether we have a national interest, because the way we just play with ourselves is unfortunate. We must sit down, do a serious rejig again, do a serious review of the entire architecture, decentralize our entire defense arrangement in such a way that states will have some level of authority. Not a situation where I learned the 8 governors are about coming together to see what they can do about. There is nothing they can do if eventually the commissioners in those states, commissioners of police in those states, will still have to turn to their IG, who will still have to turn to Mr. President. So you lack the independence, the latitude of action. You lack it. You just boil down to rhetoric, and at the end of the day, our usual style, it ends there. And the whole talk will bring some money, which end up in people's pockets. And that's all. That's Nigeria for you. We are never serious in addressing our problem. I just hope this time around, with the high casualty of death we are seeing in Plateau and so on, it will make us want to sit up once in a while. Yes, please.
Okay, real quickly, I've heard all you have said. You made mention of Israel rejigging the security architecture and all of that. Colonel, that you just said about Israel in the past over a month and a half, it's cost them $58 billion to be able to pound Gaza that way. I don't think Nigeria has that kind of financial wherewithal. I will have to ask, Colonel, we've been rejigging security architecture from God knows when. But the political will to get it done. Colonel, these people that are doing these things are not spirits. They are human beings. People know them. People are affiliated with them. People fund them. Why can't we solve that angle? Because even after the military went there and said, oh, it was caused by the devil and all of that, these people still wrote a letter. They were so brazen enough. They wrote a letter. They are coming back. And they still attacked. So the political angle, can't we tell these people and say, okay, enough of this attempt to grab land and build whatever you want to build? Can't we stop that?
You are very correct, Rufai. You just took the words out of my mouth. If I had not stopped talking, maybe those are the areas I would have gone into. The aspect of the political will to be able to get these things, push these things forward. We seem to be lacking in it. And that's why gradually I'm beginning to see a great deal of semblance in the way we are addressing security under this present administration and the last administration. The political will in this administration towards this thing is so weak. If you ask me, Rufai, I was expecting to see a commander-in-chief who will be touching down in Plateau, coming out of a military helicopter. I'm not talking of the presidential helicopter. A military helicopter in camouflage and steel helmet, assuring villagers. Assuring villagers that we shall get this rubbish done with. We shall stop this henceforth. Okay? Go about, touch the ladies, the women, touch the children, visit hospitals, and so on. And after that, turn to your service chiefs and give them 1 or 2 weeks to produce the perpetrators. Tell your national security advisor, your DSS, and the service chiefs to produce the perpetrators in the next 2 weeks or lose their jobs. This is the sort of decisiveness I expect to see from a commander-in-chief, from somebody who calls himself the father of this nation. What is happening? Just what is happening? Wow. Is it so difficult to get us out of this mess? We cannot crush these guys and kick them off our territory? What is happening?
Well, Colonel, I understand and appreciate your concern. Many other Nigerians feel the same way. But when the commander of the Operation Safe Haven
I think there's a breakdown again.
visited, can you hear me, Colonel? Well, let's fix that quickly and then we'll come back and then wrap up. We've been struggling with the audio connection, but let me go straight to the point. I was saying that other Nigerians feel the same way you feel, because life has lost value around there, certainly. But when the commander of Operation Safe Haven visited the mass graves where they were burying some of the persons who had lost their lives, he went there and told them that the military was overwhelmed and that the crisis could have been worse. And he said, well, it was the devil's work. I mean, you are a retired soldier. Could you help us clarify this? Is there a pact between the Nigerian army and the devil? So that when the military fails, a whole general will speak on television and say it's the devil's work. Is it really the devil's work? Is there a pact with the devil in the military?
Dr. Abati, I take exception to that comments from the general that it was the devil's work. The point is that if the military was overwhelmed, we all know what may have informed such overwhelming of the military. We know we have severe manpower issues, which we have been hammering on for how many years now? And that's why when some of us come on air to talk, we really wonder what else are you coming to say that has not been said. The big fives, how far have we addressed the big fives in the military? Funding, manpower, logistics equipment, motivation and welfare and so on. We have severe manpower issues in the military. As we speak, the Nigerian Army has only one recruitment platform where it trains and brings in new recruits, and that is the Depot NA. And I think as we speak, on an annual basis, we will get about 5,000 men from that source. If you juxtapose that with the number of men who, of course, will be exiting the army on an annual basis, either through casualties from the various operations and routine retirements and so on, you will agree with me that at the end of the day, you're always seeing about 2,000 or 2,500 fresh entrants out of the 5,000 which you think you are bringing in. So the point I'm making is that we should begin to expand on our training facilities. Nigeria is ripe enough, for the army by now is ripe enough to have about 4 or 5 depots. You know, we have one already in Zaria. What stops us from having one in the west, here in Lagos, and in the east, and even up north, you know? So that on an annual basis, we can boast of nearly 20,000 coming into the army, fresh recruits. We need to work on this assiduously, Dr. Abati. Otherwise, all this talk of being overwhelmed and so on will be there. Like you know, we are presently in a war situation. And in any given war situation, the enemy has the initiative. And if the enemy has the initiative, it means he is privileged to you know, choose his time, privileged to choose where he attacks, privileged to you know, he has all the privilege at his disposal, both time, location, and what have you. Why you remain to wait and react? So all you try to do is to see how you position yourself to be able to gain some level of proactiveness by the time he launches. And the enemy is not a daft, let's face it. And that's why they will look at where you are already and then go to ungoverned areas where you have citizens just thinly spread out and what have you in communities, and attack such communities, kill them in their numbers, so that before you even want to get there, I'm afraid they are done and even on their way out.
All right.
So we must look inwards and look for solutions to all this. It's important.
Well, that's what we're looking forward to, looking for solutions to the insecurity challenges in the nation. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Colonel Hassan, Stan-Labo.